A huge renovation for elder care? $30,000? What's going on? Wait, isn't that my wife's parents' house? Then, I get this strange call from someone claiming to be my estranged sister-in-law's husband. Something doesn't add up here. It seems like my sister-in-law might be plotting something. Hi, I'm Martha, a 56-year-old stay-at-home wife. My kids are grown and out of the house now. So it's just me, my husband, and my in-laws living together. Thankfully, I have a good relationship with them, which is nice since I lost my own parents when I was young. With the kids gone, my husband and I are finally enjoying some freedom from parenting duties. When my husband and I tied the knot, we knew we'd eventually share a home with his parents. However, my mother-in-law, who had a rough time with her own mother-in-law, had her house turned into a two-family home for us. Even though we live under the same roof, we each have our own space, which has probably helped our relationship flourish. While my husband is at work during the day, I often hang out with my in-laws. One day, while my father-in-law was busy with farm chores, I was fixing lunch in the kitchen, planning for us to enjoy it outside. Suddenly, a call came from one of my father-in-law's farming buddies, informing us that he had fallen and broken a bone. He had already been rushed to the family doctor in a pickup truck. My mother-in-law and I abandoned the food and hurried to the hospital. When we got there, emergency surgery was in progress. Despite seeming healthy, my father-in-law was in his 80s, so bouncing back from a fracture wouldn't be easy. The doctors warned us to brace for the worst, possibly even needing a wheelchair. So that's what they meant. As long as he pulls through, that's all that matters. I'll be there to support him, I vowed. We sat anxiously, hearts heavy with prayers, as the surgery dragged on. By the time my husband finished work and joined us, the surgery was over, and we breathed a collective sigh of relief seeing my father-in-law peacefully sleeping in his hospital room, free of any major complications. We decided to rally around him together from then on. But our hopes were dashed when, just a month later, my father-in-law passed away suddenly. His age had left him vulnerable, and he succumbed to an infection that took hold after the surgery. With many of his friends and family also elderly, we hesitated to burden them with news of the wake and funeral. After much discussion, we settled on a private family funeral. Yet even in death, there were unresolved tensions. What about my sister-in-law? I raised the question to my mother-in-law and husband, both wearing expressions of disapproval, likely remembering her troubled marriage, which they had vehemently opposed. While my husband didn't share their strong opposition, he couldn't fully embrace the idea either. This created a strain, causing their relationship with their daughter to become distant. Still, she was their flesh and blood. Shouldn't she have the chance to bid her final farewell? Eventually, they relented, agreeing that if we could reach her, she could attend. But our attempts to contact her proved futile, and the funeral proceeded without her presence. It's just the way things are with her. It's fate. Don't dwell on it, Martha. My mother-in-law comforted me, gently patting my shoulder as we made our way home from the crematorium with my father-in-law's ashes. His sudden passing left us all reeling, without any mental preparation for the funeral and cremation process. As we clasped his ashes and lit incense, the days that followed were filled with a sense of emptiness. It's easier when my husband is here. We can lean on each other. But when he's at work, the silence becomes unbearable. So I find solace in my mother-in-law's company. I know she's enduring even greater pain and sorrow than I am. After all, she lost the husband she'd been with for so many years in the blink of an eye. Even if it's just a facade, I make an effort to maintain a cheerful demeanor around her, I admitted. But my mother-in-law surprised me with her pragmatism. I had planned to keep things this way until the 49th day. However, yes, we can go through his belongings later. But I'm already over 80. You look remarkably young for your age, mother-in-law. Rarely ill, she'd often mention her only hospitalization being childbirth, indicating her robust health. Essentially, she assured us not to worry about her. You're very kind, Martha. But while I'm still mobile, I'd like to organize our things, including his, she insisted. I understand the sentiment of wanting to preserve important memories, like your father-in-law's belongings. Just let me know if you need assistance, I offered. She promptly asked for help retrieving items out of her reach. As we sifted through old photos of my father-in-law, she fondly recalled their youth, sharing tales of their adventures. I listened attentively, nodding along. When the phone rang, my mother-in-law, who didn't own a smartphone, relied on the landline for communication. I wonder who that could be. Only a few close friends knew our situation, and I thought they might avoid calling once they knew. But it might be urgent. I'll answer it. Considering her difficulty in moving, I decided to answer the phone myself rather than inconvenience her. I quickly reached for the receiver near the entrance, greeted by a polite voice I didn't recognize, introducing himself as my sister-in-law's husband. However, I had never crossed paths with him before, leaving me uncertain if he truly was who he claimed to be. As I listened, pondering if this was a new scam targeting the elderly, he broached the topic. I want to discuss the home renovation for caregiving. My father-in-law had already passed away, so why mention caregiving renovations now? Could he have mistaken my mother-in-law's situation? But she wasn't in need of such extensive care. Excuse me? Are you certain you've dialed the right number? This is my wife's family home, isn't it? The man, supposedly my sister-in-law's husband, referenced her maiden name, which indeed matched my husband's family. There was no mistaking this as their residence. Furthermore, his mention of my sister-in-law's name confirmed his authenticity. Yes, the person you mentioned is indeed my husband's sister. Thank you for your understanding. Given the difficulties our family has faced due to our troubled marriage, I feared I had made a negative impression once again. Although I wasn't privy to why my in-laws vehemently opposed my sister-in-law's marriage, this man didn't give off any negative vibes. On the contrary, he appeared genuinely humble and sincere. According to him, he had heard about the estimated $30,000 needed for caregiving renovations and was determined to make amends for the trouble he had caused. He assured us he intended to fulfill the payment, but needed an extension due to difficulty in gathering the funds by the deadline. It's awkward to have him explain everything before divulging this, but his earnestness made me falter. Thank you for your courtesy. Regarding the extension, please give me a moment. When did you learn about the caregiving renovation? My father-in-law was in good health and actively engaged in agriculture until recently. So there was no need for caregiving renovations at all. Past tense. Yes, my father-in-law passed away. We just concluded his funeral and cremation. I understand. I could almost sense his panic on the other end of the line. He must have been bewildered by the disparity between what his wife had relayed and the truth I presented. It simply didn't add up for him. Gradually, he confessed to having caused considerable distress to my in-laws. When he married into the family, he believed his wife's assertion that her father required care, and he aimed to offer financial aid as a gesture of apology for the inconvenience he had caused. He recounted this to me, seemingly sincere in his intentions. I probed how the notion of my father-in-law needing care had arisen. It emerged a few years back. Initially, he appeared to send a fixed sum each month to contribute to caregiving expenses. However, it became apparent that neither my father-in-law nor mother-in-law were aware of such arrangements. Had they known, my mother-in-law would have surely invited him to the funeral. He claimed her mother had expressed gratitude and that it had been helpful, leading me to believe I was gradually being forgiven. If you were truly forgiven, wouldn't she communicate with you? That's a valid point. Moreover, the amount of money sent annually seemed to be increasing. He had been sending more each month, assuming we had requested additional support, a request we had no memory of making. So none of this money reached you? As I confirmed, I sensed his growing frustration. It was challenging for me to articulate while also absorbing the information. I speculated that perhaps my sister-in-law. Well, I couldn't outright say you're being deceived. But he interjected, you don't need to tiptoe around it. I'm being deceived, aren't I? Unable to confirm or deny, I remained silent. He likely interpreted my silence as confirmation, seeking guidance on how to proceed if indeed being deceived. He turned to me. While it wasn't my place to advise, I couldn't bear to abandon my sister-in-law, my husband's sibling. Despite our estrangement, I assured him we would discuss the matter and get back to him later. And with that, our conversation concluded for the day. Upon returning to my mother-in-law, she remarked, "That was quite the lengthy call. Was it one of those persistent salespeople? You know, you should just hang up on them." She assumed it was a pushy sales call. "No, it was someone claiming to be my sister-in-law's husband," I replied, sharing the details of the conversation with her. Anger simmered beneath her calm facade as she listened, erupting further upon hearing the entirety of it. What kind of person is she, using her father as an excuse to extort money from her husband? My mother-in-law's hands trembled with fury. It wasn't the first time my sister-in-law had displayed financial irresponsibility, often splurging on luxury items she couldn't afford with her allowance or part-time job earnings. Her behavior seemed suspicious. When she decided to marry, her partner was a man of considerable wealth, which led her parents to vehemently oppose the union. Their opposition wasn't for the sake of my sister-in-law, but rather for her partner's well-being. We then agreed to wait at the culprit's residence with her husband for her eventual return. It had been so long since I last laid eyes on my sister-in-law. When she first introduced her then-boyfriend, now husband, to her parents and brother with marriage intentions, there was quite a stir. However, as I wasn't yet formally part of the family, I wasn't present for the commotion. Hence, this would mark my initial encounter with my sister-in-law's spouse. As I had sensed during our phone conversation, he appeared genuinely sincere with a pleasant demeanor. Despite rumors of his substantial income, he didn't seem to lead an extravagant lifestyle. Instead, he appeared to opt for a more modest existence. However, if one of the reasons behind this modesty stemmed from my sister-in-law's deceit, it undoubtedly evoked a complex mix of emotions. Meeting my sister-in-law again after many years, her unexpected encounter with her mother at home left her visibly stunned, her eyes widening in disbelief as she stood frozen in place. The image I had of my sister-in-law was one of someone with a penchant for flashy things. However, the woman before me now appeared excessively ostentatious, lacking any sense of refinement, which was somewhat disheartening to witness. The three of us had agreed beforehand to play along with my sister-in-law's charade. Initially, we opted not to address her deceit directly. "It's been quite some time. I'm glad to see you're doing well," I greeted her with warmth. Caught off guard by the unexpected kindness, my sister-in-law stuttered in response to her mother, perhaps fearing her lies had been exposed, and she would face reprimand. "I've been wanting to see you again after all these years. How have you been?" We chose not to divulge the truth about her father's passing and upheld the pretense that he was still alive. I offered my apologies for not keeping in touch and exchanged pleasantries accordingly. Humbly, my sister-in-law expressed relief that her mother seemed healthy and admitted to worrying about her. However, conspicuously absent from her remarks was any mention of her father. We were keen to avoid any discussion that might inadvertently reveal the truth about her father's condition or the issue of caregiving expenses. It appeared that my husband and she had crossed paths before, yet her deception remained undetected. Perhaps she believed she could continue her charade without consequence. "Your mom seems pleased. It looks like you two are doing well together," remarked my mother-in-law. She was hopeful that her daughter would mend her ways and gradually start supporting her husband. The strategy was to shower her with praise in the hopes of prompting a change of heart. Somehow, my sister-in-law went a step too far, assuring my mother-in-law that she would provide caregiving support if needed and even insisted not to worry about finances. It's astonishing she could make such promises in front of her husband, who had been supporting her with good intentions. My heart went out to him as he listened to it all, I lamented. Expressing our gratitude, we took our leave that day. Judging from her actions, it seemed probable that my sister-in-law had been diverting the money she requested for her own use. Uncertain of where the hefty sum of $30,000 had disappeared to, we opted to hire a private investigator to delve into her financial affairs. The monthly caregiving funds totaling several $1,000s, were evidently being redirected for her personal benefit. However, what unfolded was a shocking revelation. She was deeply entangled with a favored club host, lavishing him with financial support in a bid to elevate his status. Her extravagant spending included purchasing costly bottles and accumulating debts she couldn't settle each month. As the host faced mounting pressure to settle his unpaid bills, amounting to $30,000, my sister-in-law's husband was incensed, realizing he could no longer turn a blind eye. He meticulously orchestrated his plans while she was away on a trip with her preferred host, oblivious to the unfolding events. Upon returning home a few days later, she was met with a stark reality. Her house was devoid of furniture or personal belongings, leaving her in a state of panic, frantically attempting to reach her husband to no avail. She eventually contacted me in distress. Initially hysterical, she immediately quieted down when I nonchalantly inquired about her trip with the club host. Unable to question how I was aware of her actions without admitting guilt, she found herself at a loss for words. Now it was my turn to confront her, leaving no room for rebuttal. Your deception hasn't gone unnoticed. You've betrayed not only your mother and husband, but also shattered any trust others may have had in you. Furthermore, the father-in-law you exploited as an excuse has passed away. It wasn't entirely her fault for being unaware of her father's passing, but using his supposed care as a pretext to solicit money was unquestionably wrong. I made it clear that her ex-husband was also privy to the truth, and upon realizing she had been abandoned, she erupted into a fit of screams over the phone, resembling a person unhinged. Refusing to engage with her ex-husband and unwilling to burden my elderly mother-in-law further, I volunteered to act as an intermediary with my sister-in-law. Despite her continued protests over the phone, she evoked pity in a way, oblivious to her father's demise and exploiting him as a means to an end. Though she might harbor regrets, it was too late for remorse. I delivered one final message to her. Your ex-husband intends to demand full repayment for the money you squandered on the host. You'll need to find a way to settle the $30,000 debt on your own. Subsequently, she received legal documents from a lawyer. Despite her request to speak with her husband, he remained resolute, unable to stomach any interaction with his ex-wife, even for legal proceedings. With no room for negotiation, my sister-in-law was left to eke out a modest living while grappling with the weight of her debts. Naturally timid, she lived in perpetual fear of the lawyer's notices and the unwelcome visits from debt collectors. As for us, we resumed our ordinary lives. While it took some time to sift through my father-in-law's belongings, we resolved to move forward as a family, including his share. Recently, my mother-in-law has begun showing signs of decline, hinting that the day she'll require care may be nearing. Since we couldn't do much for my father-in-law, my husband, and I pledged to do our utmost for my mother-in-law,